we're at the same time as other things. So we're extremely grateful that you're here. This all kind of came around because I had a dream. I'm a huge dreamer, and I decided to put my dream into action. And I think that is really important when we might have lots of different dreams, but actually actioning them is a whole other kettle of fish, and it can be really difficult, but it can be so rewarding as well. And so I kind of came up with an idea when I was in Mexico last year. I was traveling, and I was like, oh my God, I really want to publish my poetry, but I just didn't have enough to publish my own book. And so I was on the other side of the world, and I thought, I'm just going to send a message to my closest confidants, who I know are amazing poets and writers, and asked if they would like to contribute to the poetry book. And they were like, yeah, of course, we'd love that. And I'm like, great. And then I forget about it, as you do. And life goes on, and I'm traveling, I'm doing all this stuff, and I start getting messages going, Steph, what's going on with this poetry book? And what they were doing was they were holding me accountable. And I was really grateful for that. So I then thought, well, okay, there's a handful of us. That's still not enough. How can I combine my community and my love for community by giving people an opportunity to actually be published? Because for me, it is all about uplifting others and giving others an opportunity and seeing the value in that. So I put a call out on social media, had an overwhelming response, and I thought, this is wonderful. This is absolutely so beautiful. This is going to happen now. So I did a few things which are unheard of in the publishing industry. But before I go on, who here writes poetry? Oh, awesome. Okay. So do you guys write as well, or just poetry? You also write. Awesome. Cool. And have you published? Okay, awesome. Perfect. So I self-published The World in Our Words and Fiercely Me. But within poetry, generally what happens is you submit your poems and that's it. You just kind of submit it and you don't really hear about it until it's published. Now that wasn't really my style, so what I did was I built on that, and I was like, how can I build a community within this project? And so I got 22 poets from all over the world to come together to put down their ideologies, to put down their political beliefs, to put down their religion, and to for 6 months just come together and connect. And it was the most beautiful thing that I could have ever experienced in this world, because we had people from Canada, we had people from America, we had people from Israel, we had people from Australia, we had people from Mexico, Portugal,
UK.
I think that's it.
England.
Oh, in England, sorry.
Scotland.
Yes, in Scotland. England and Scotland. And so it was really genuinely a collaboration in that sense. But I also wanted to celebrate all language, which again is not heard of. And so this poetry book has 5 different languages. And I think it might be the only poetry book in the world that actually has 5 different languages. And so it has Spanish, it has Portuguese, it has Vietnamese, it has Hebrew, and it has English. But I was very, very lucky to be able to transfer, the poets were able to translate all of their poems except 2 into English. So that was the kind of starting point of The World in Our Words. And it was absolutely incredible because I watched these people come into this project and they were insecure. They didn't think that they were good enough. They thought their poetry wasn't good enough. They were like, oh, I don't even know if I should. And within that process, I actually challenged all of the poets, and I didn't even realize that I was challenging them. And so when Fiona talks about when you have to sit in the discomfort to actually develop, it's so true. Because they came in and they were like, here's my poetry, and then I was like, hey, they were like, hey, what's the theme? I'm like, there isn't a theme. And they were like, what? And they're like, well, what should I give you? I'm like, well, what does your heart sing to? What do you want to give me? What do you want the world to see? And so that was really confronting for a lot of people. And they're like, well, how, should I do a new work? And I'm like, well, that's also completely up to you. And it was a really beautiful, beautiful experience to see how challenging not giving someone a script is. By not going, this is what I want from you, this is how I want it, but by going, you have the autonomy to decide what you want and what you want the world to see through this process. So all of this happens, and I send out contracts because I'm a very ethical human being, and I think everything should be above board. And one of the key differences within this process is that I wanted to change the publishing industry by paying all of the poets. So if you go to my website and order a book through mrsrowe.org, all of the proceeds go to the poets. When you go through the bigger publishing agencies, it's very small. But every quarter, I divvy up all the money and I send everybody royalties. Now that also does not happen in this world. So and I wanted to be that change. I was like, the only way that this world can change is if someone does it first. And I really wanted to be like, no, I value each poet. You should be paid. So I do that, and I continue to do that. So then what happens is I publish the book, and it goes out into the world. And I have to admit, it was the most magical thing, because what then happens is this huge shift. So 22 people come into this, or 21 come into this, a little rocky, a little unsure, and they come out of it with a published book, and they're like, oh my God, I'm actually a poet, I'm a published poet. So they've now gone on to do some amazing things. Like so many of them have, and I realised the importance of encouragement, of supporting people. You put them in the right environment and they flourish. And the world in our words is a representation of that. So I want to now kind of shift a little bit to writing, and I know that some of you here are writers, but I would like to talk about the process, because I've written Fiercely Me, and I always get asked, how did you write a book? And I want to kind of go into a little bit of how that process happens. So, I write. I have always written, but I write everywhere. I am a fluid human being. If creativity comes to me, that's it. Everything just stops. It doesn't matter if I'm at work. It doesn't matter if I'm commuting. It doesn't matter if I'm in a park, if I'm watching a concert. If the creativity is sparked, I stop, I get my phone out, I get my notepad out, and I write things down. And I think it's important to remember that we have to have space for creativity. And in this world where we are always pressured to get to work on time, to clean the house, to look after the children, to do the myriad of things that are expected of us, we always put our creativity to the side a lot. And I have shifted completely now, and I don't. I'm like, if I want to write, I will write. It doesn't matter where I am. It doesn't matter if I'm in a meeting, I will write, and I will write things down. And that's why we wanted to give you the notepads for our little piece to give to you, to remind you that you can actually create anywhere in this world. So, I write everywhere. I write whenever, and if I want to do like a full book like Fiercely Me, I will write dedicatedly every single day. Now there is an element because this isn't new knowledge, but writing every day isn't really about how many words you write and how many pages you write. It's really about, maybe there's an idea, maybe there's a sentence, maybe there's a paragraph that really sparks to you that you can use. But if you didn't write every day, then you wouldn't have that to kind of go back and reflect and use. And I think that's really important to know. And I know that it's really a routine, yeah? And you have to commit to yourself that it's important to you to write and sit down and to make space for that. And I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about that process, because we are in a world at the moment where we have phones and we have computers and we have technology and we're darting all over the place. Like, we're just like, oh, there's so much knowledge coming into us. But when you sit down and you find words and you put them into sentences and then into paragraphs, for me personally, I am absorbing all of the information, everything that I have learned, read, watch videos. I'm sitting down, taking that space and that time to cognitively work out what my thoughts are and what I want to write. And I think that's really important, because we can watch lots of things and absorb lots of information, but we might not actually cognitively work out what our position is or what we actually cognitively think. And I think that's something that might be missing a little bit at the moment, but is extremely powerful when you actually sit down. And I was watching a video recently, and the man was like, the highest form of intelligence, in his opinion, was to sit down and write. And I thought, I agree with you. I really do, because we can talk and we can kind of mull over ideas and concepts and things, but to sit down and clarify exactly what we want to say, now that's powerful. And it also means that it's going to live on if you print it, far beyond when we pass away. And that's also something really beautiful. When we write books and we write poetry and we have that physical copy, that will be here for so many generations after us. And we don't understand who's going to read it in the future and need our words and the power of that. And so I think, having that moment and that time to sit down and write and to publish is so important. So that's kind of one element of writing every day, and that's how I got Fiercely Me published. But the other element is poetry for me. Now, poetry is like I don't know how to describe it, but it is, for me, the most funnest part of being a human being, because it's like a lightning bolt comes straight down and hits me, and it's like, you need to write this immediately. And I just write it. And I spend probably 10 or 15 minutes writing my poetry. I spend maybe another 10 minutes editing it, and it's done. I don't touch it. Right? And so that's my process. It might not be yours, but that's mine. And I have found over the years, when it comes to creativity and our relationship to it, there's a lot of conditions that seem to be put on us by the world. Well, you have to do this and you have to do that, and there's all these books and there's all these YouTube and there's all these podcasts on how to create. But the reality is, for me, it's just to create. I don't worry about all of the noise. I don't worry about the condition. I just create. And it's okay if it's not perfect, because it's mine. And I hope when you do read the book, you read the poems and you realize how powerful our words are. Because it touches something inside me when I read poetry. It just opens me up, and it's like, oh my God, I can see into the soul of this poet. I can see how they're moving through this world in a very different way. It's just so powerful. So I have spurts and I write, and that's it, it's done. But I also suggest trying different styles, because my style is very fluid. No conditions. And a lot of the time people are like, oh, I don't know about that. And I'm like, but it's different for everybody. So it is a very powerful form, and I do think that poetry is a way to connect how do I put this? It is a way to connect through borders. It's a way to connect humanity, because when you read this poetry book, you see how there's so many people from all over the world, but you realize that we're all the same, that we're all living the same life. Obviously there's nuances, but we're all the same in the sense of how we experience, and I think that is an extremely powerful thing. So with this, I'm going to end there, but I would like to hand over to Tarika Strudwick, and she's going to go through some really powerful seasons and the connection of creativity with seasons. But after that, we're going to do a meditation, and then we're going to do the collaboration poem, which I'm very excited about. And I do want to get your emails if I can, because I'm going to publish it on my website, and I want to send it to you all. But essentially what we're going to do is the post-it notes that you have, we're going to ask you to write a sentence or 2 sentences, and we're going to put it up on the board, and then we're going to create a collaboration poem from today, which I think is really cool. And there is a collaboration poem in the back of The World in Our Words, and essentially it was the same thing, but I organized it alphabetically by their first name, and it was sensational. I read the poem first and I cried, and I read the poem again and I cried again. I read it again and I cried again, because it really does represent humanity. It represents the soul of who we are, and to have people just randomly send me poem, like a sentence of poem, and then for me to put it together and to be so beautiful is amazing. And so I wanted to replicate that today with you, and I want to give that back to you for you to kind of go and share it in your networks, because poetry is a very powerful medium. But anyway, I'm going to hand over to Tarika Stradley.
Woo!